$5,000 fine or up to 6 months in jail. So yeah, really pretty serious. The order further limits gatherings to close family members, a criterion the lawsuit says should not be defined by the state and is too vague for practical application by the police. 3 plaintiffs who joined the lawsuit said they fear arrest whenever they leave their homes each day to care for their elderly mothers. Puerto Rico has restricted traffic to alternating days based on license plates as well. So like if you went out one day, you can't go out the next, and they will be able to tell at least by your license plate. The order expects constitutional rights to be blindly handed over to the government, and that is unacceptable, the lawsuit says. On Sunday, Governor Vasquez announced even tighter rules shutting down all businesses except for pharmacies and gas stations later this week from Good Friday through Easter Sunday, because a lot of people most likely will be off of work. So yeah, that's a really pretty crazy situation here. But what do we see from Wall Street? They are up, baby. Woohoo! Yeah, things are looking good. Wall Street's back. Let's go. How about that? Wall Street with a surge. How about that? Yeah, even as officials were warning Americans to brace themselves for a week of sadness, death, and challenges, U.S. stocks rallied and global markets surged on Monday as investors looked to signs that the outbreak was peaking in some of the world's worst hit places. The S&P 500 rose about 4% in early trading, and after grappling with intense market volatility during the month of March as efforts to contain the spread of the virus weighed on the economy, investors were cheered by the numbers showing that pace of new confirmed infections and deaths were slowing in some places in Europe. In the United States, the Trump administration, while warning a hard week ahead, suggests the outbreak could be near its peak in some places, which is a good sign. This is plateauing. They don't expect, at least in New York City, to have a plateau until end of April, early May, which is coming up soon. So we're in the beginning of April now anyway. Maybe wait a few more weeks and we get to the peak. But like the rest of the country is still going to have a lot of its peaks to go to. New York is relatively ahead, at least on the curve in terms of the trend line of the way these things are unfolding here. So that's kind of disturbing as well. Although it was good to at least have maybe things opening up again in New York pretty soon. But just thoughts out there are really whatever positive thoughts we may have are really kind of turned to dust as we think of the upcoming weeks ahead of just really rough times for a lot of people as they deal with this crisis, which is supposed to be reaching its worst point in New York in the coming days. And like, where the people, they have done no social distancing whatsoever. Like, we didn't exactly have the quickest social distancing laws coming into effect, but you look at places like Mississippi, look like places like Florida that I mentioned earlier, they don't got much going on there at all whatsoever. Like, they're just not doing any, like Mississippi, I see a lot of stuff. I mean, you see Andy Beshear handling pretty well. I do want to talk about Andy Beshear a little bit later in the show. But in Kentucky, he's doing a pretty good job there. But it's really varied. And you wonder, will the curves go higher? Will things be worse than they are in New York, which they're pretty bad? Because even in New York, they've done a pretty good job with the social distancing. And Cuomo's been very aggressive about it, even though he has made some really unquestionably bad policy decisions, like trying to cut Medicaid in this budget, even though we are in the middle of a global pandemic here. Probably the worst time you could choose to do something like that. But it is really crazy to see what is happening in New York, and you really shudder to think what could be happening in the future. Also, quickly, Japan will declare a state of emergency as the virus surges in Tokyo and other cities. We'll talk about coming up next. Next up, we're going to be talking about the conflicts in the White House over a drug the president insists on promoting, but there has been some disagreement from that. Prime Minister Boris Johnson of Britain has been hospitalized for coronavirus treatment as Queen Elizabeth addressed the nation, as we talked about. UN details describe a horrifying global surge in domestic abuse amid these lockdowns and domestic violence, especially with husbands beating their wives as they've been kind of trapped at this time, very sadly. as many of half of those with the coronavirus could probably be asymptomatic, according to Dr. Anthony Fauci. And lockdown within a lockdown has been eased in Spain as a drop in deaths have been reported. So that's just a little bit some of the updates from around the world on the coronavirus. As we continue here, I want to give you a look at what's coming. We're going to be talking about the White House's economic plan for the future and a really chilling moment as Trump refuses to allow Dr. Fauci to answer questions on the dangers of hydrochloroquine. We're going to talk about that drug that we thought was going away, but really isn't, coming up in the future. Later we'll be talking about Michael Barbaro and this new governor from Kentucky, Andrew Bashir. I believe his name is Andrew. But yeah, we're going to be talking about him in the future, and we will first, though, talk about the smash and grab economics plan coming out of the White House. We're getting new reports today about a style of smash and grab economics that is quite disturbing, as desperate workers' common dreams here. Jake Johnson reporting about the unemployed, desperate workers and small businesses as they struggle to obtain benefits authorized under the multi-trillion-dollar coronavirus stimulus package President Donald Trump signed into law late last month. The White House is reportedly considering an additional slate of aid measures that critics say would disproportionately favor the wealthy while providing little relief for those in need. And it really just shows you all of the craziness that we see going on here, and really in ways that are not necessarily just the eye-catching $500 billion slush fund that is supposed to go to businesses who need bailouts, pretty much at the discretion of the very business-friendly Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin. But there still is more and more signs that we see this in the fine print, that there will be, like for example, Jerome Powell of the Fed saying, "Oh, we have unlimited ammunition. We're not going to run out of ammunition." Was the actually the direct quote, and it pretty much shows you that they're in this. They really are in this for the long haul here. So, according to the Washington Post, what they're trying to do here is a payroll tax cut, a capital gains tax cut, which would create a 50-year Treasury bonds to lock in low interest rates, and a waiver that would clear businesses of liabilities from employees who contract the coronavirus on the job. So pretty much what it is, it's a huge giveaway to the big businesses here that we see really time and time again from this Republican government and the Democrats, who seem really all too willing to just stand by and let it happen. He's also considering an infrastructure package, according to the Washington Post, but that idea has been met with some resistance. So slashing the capital gains tax is broadly understood to be a move that would overwhelmingly reward rich investors, and it's long been an obsession of the Trump White House, and really what they're trying to do is, like, there would be no better time to do this, right? This massive giveaway to the richest people, and the richest and most powerful people have such a hold right now over our government. It's really crazy, and it's like, this is the time that they decided to do it. Right here in the middle of a pandemic crisis situation, that is when they find the time to do it the best. So last year, as Common Dreams reported, Trump floated the idea of bypassing Congress to index a capital gains to inflation, but never acted amid warnings that such a unilateral change would be illegal. The Center on Budget and Policy Priorities estimated in 2018 an analysis that 86% of benefits indexed in capital gains and inflation would flow to the top 1%. So this is from someone who works there named Chai-Ching Huang. Capital gains tax cut, no detail, but see above, they seem to be recycling bad ideas. So take their last bad capital gains tax idea as an example of the shape of distribution you can expect from a tax cut geared to people with capital gains tax. There would be a regressive tax. So the top 10% would get around 13%, would 88th to the 99th percentile would get around 13%, and the remaining 86% would go entirely to the top 1%. Actually, sorry, 1% would go to the fifth of income distribution, according to this graph put out here for the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities. Estimated that in a 2018 analysis from the Penn Wharton budget model. Yeah, and the really crazy thing is this just has no value and no benefit to actually helping the crisis and actually solving the crisis. And the big thing about a crisis is it is really, and I say this quite cynically, I know, but I really feel like it's a reality. Like someone could try and prove me wrong, but it is it's the just the benefit of trying to just take what ideas are around you and really mold them into your belief system. Take the ideas lying around is the quote. I don't know who. Milton Friedman is actually who said it. Only a crisis, actual or perceived, produces real change. When the crisis occurs, the actions are taken depend on the ideas that are lying around. That, I believe, is our basic function, to develop alternatives to existing policies, to keep them alive and available until the politically impossible becomes the politically inevitable, which is really a great way of looking at it. And it really could not be a worse time for the left wing to have a crisis, because a lot of their ideas are not lying around. Like Bernie Sanders all but vanquished Joe Biden, and the really politically impotent Democrats still kind of clinging on to their position. Joe Biden now really much, we should say, struggling to read things off of note cards in his cable interviews. Like, this is a very, very friendly, like, he was on MSNBC reading off a note card in an interview with like Nicole Wallace, which shows you things are not going well. When you're on a cable news hit that's supposed to be friendly to you, it's not he's not being interviewed by Tucker Carlson here. He's interviewed by someone who really wants to see him succeed and do well, but he is putting out note cards and he's reading off note cards and forgetting what he's saying off those note cards, which is really disturbing to say the least. But that's who we have to represent us in this time of crisis. Like, we don't have really that many people with that much power, and the ideas that are really lying around are the ones that the Republicans have, and they're going to really use them. And a crisis, it's so true. Only a crisis, actual or perceived, produces real change. Change most likely will come, and it already is coming for the top 1%. We're repeating the same mistakes that produced or were made in the wake of the 2008 recession, and what we did to bail out and provide so much money in terms of just really support from the Fed over and over and over again to the biggest banks, to Wall Street, and all of that. So that was something that was really a mistake that seems to really have been compounded at this time by people who are of great influence in our society today. So, yeah, this kind of idea, it's really very disturbing. Here's some of the reactions. Eric Levitt said, quote, "Won't somebody think of the employees who, quote, want to coerce their the employers who want to coerce their employees into accepting life-threatening workplace conditions without facing legal liability?" Like, that's what New York Magazine's Eric Levitt tweeted sardonically. So it's really what it's doing is it's pretty much accepting and putting the responsibility, as well as not only just sending all the benefits to the top 1% or 86% of the benefits. It's also forcing these people to a large amount of the workers that we call our heroes. Hooray! Or thank you so much for our heroes. Like, you are making them accept here liability they should not have to accept, and facing and pushing the liability all onto them and off of the people who are forcing them to come in and work in these conditions. So that is really another hidden dagger in this bill. Freelance journalist John Walker called the Trump administration's reported proposals the worst set of ideas for dealing with a pandemic. "We are beyond parity at this point," he wrote, "making easier for people to get sick at work, rewarding people for going to work in a time of a pandemic, rewarding vulture capitalists for profiteering off of a crisis. This is what we are doing here right now," which is really disturbing. That triple threat there, a payroll tax cut, capital gains tax cut, and creating 50-year treasury bonds to lock in low interest rates, and a waiver. This last part is really the hidden dagger here. A waiver that would clear businesses of liabilities from employees who contract the coronavirus on the job. So really devastating. What looks like to be quadruple punch from this really kind of awful situation. All right, so that is a little bit about what the White House is doing to contract this crisis here on Newsflash. Well, more for you after this.
Wow, how things can change from one week to the next.